So we've been huge fans of Eye Monsters for years. I think their Never Odd or Even album is probably the retro album that I'd like to have done if I was talented enough. And they've done patches for us, and they're supremely cool guys. And they came to us at one point with this idea of doing an album dedicated to 8 musical instrument pioneers, electronic musical instrument pioneers. And we were like, yeah, kind of how do we help? And initially they wanted to loan gear off of us and do kind of gear swap-ins and swap-outs. Because if they had a track dedicated to Moog or a track dedicated to ARP, it was done using the authentic instruments, the real things from that period. And that worked really well. We were lending them gear at a rapid rate of knots, and they were coming down, swapping stuff out and whatnot. And then at one point during a gear swap out, Dean asked me, I don't suppose you fancy doing one of your little YouTube films for this album, do you? And I immediately thought about an occasion where I had taken the back of our Mini Moog off to take to NAMM, which is the kind of musical instrument industry trade show in LA every year. And on the way to the airport, I had suddenly realised I'd forgotten it, and the intention was to get Bob Moog to sign it. And I was like, and cursing and swearing and stuff. And Chris, business partner, said, look, don't worry, he'll be there at the next European trade show in Frankfurt. And that was in March. But sadly he wasn't, and in 2005 Bob died, and the world lost a legend, really, a kind of musical instrument pioneer, icon, and a real gentleman. I was fortunate enough to meet him on several occasions. So when Dean kind of asked me if I was interested in doing something to support Bright Sparks, the album, I immediately started thinking, yeah, we need to document these people's stories. And whilst a lot of it had been, is available in text format, Mark Vale's synthesizer book, I think, is an exemplary example of it. I really wanted people to have the feeling that they were sat in the same room as them, talking to them, particularly in their latter stages of life where, you've done the kind of the stress of running a business, and you've been through all the trials and tribulations, and you've sort of put things into context, and you can see things a little more clearly. And that was the start of Bright Sparks. Obviously the first person was Bob, top of the tree, but for me the two important people I really wanted to get were his daughter Michelle Moog-Koussa, who's a great ambassador for the Moog Foundation, and Herb Deutsch, who was with him right at the inception of the Moog modular.
Music will never be the same. It will never be the same. Because you gave us the synthesizer. Music will never be the same. Music will never be the same.
2500, 2600.
Alan Pearlman had always been this fascinating figure. I love the 2600, love the Odyssey, love the 2500. That's the only real synth that I really want, which is way out of our league now. But obviously ARP's demise was in the 80s, and Alan had been this kind of very almost reclusive figure. And in fact, I think the only time I'd ever heard anything from him was in Mark Vale's book, The Synthesizer, which was an amazing resource. So in my head, I was like, if I could get to Alan Pearlman, that would be amazing. It would be a really amazing achievement to kind of hear the story from the horse's mouth. And again, through Mark, I contacted Mark Vale, who was in touch with Alan, who gave me his phone number and arranged for me to talk to him. And that was amazing. I was like a true, proper fanboy, really nervous. It was like, you don't know me, I'm just this kind of guy from the UK who loves everything you do, and I want to do this little documentary. And he was amazingly humble. In fact, he said to me, I'm kind of like, I'm nothing special, I'm like the man behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz, which sort of really intrigued me. And I think at the time he was approaching 90, and I think he, after a couple of conversations, he said, yeah, okay, I'll talk to you. So Chris and I got on a plane and flew to Boston immediately to record, what turned out to be a real life-changing interview for me. We spent a day with him, And we got on really, really well, to the point where him and his wife Buena asked us to stay for supper that evening. And we were talking about, you know, his favourite films, which turns out to be Young Frankenstein. He's a huge comedy fan, and the music that he liked and stuff like that. You know, we kind of done the synth stuff, so now it was kind of more personal. And at one point we said, you know, have you ever been to the UK? And he said, yeah, once in the 70s. It was very stuffy. We were like, what do you mean? And he said, well, we stayed in this kind of posh hotel and we'd just flown in and we were hungry and we wanted to go and eat in the restaurant. But we have a daughter, Dina, who was obviously young at the time, and we couldn't get into the restaurant without having the aperitif in the bar beforehand, but we couldn't get into the bar because Dina was underage. Of course, Chris and I were like, that sounds very kind of British 70s stuffiness. So we just casually asked, you know, so what did you do? And Buena, Alan's wife, said, I did what kept me alive as a child. I elbowed my way to the food. And we were like, what do you mean? And she just looked at us and said, 3 concentration camps, my dear. And our jaws just hit the floor. And then she told us her story. So, which for me was just mind-blowing. And we left every interview going, wow. But with this one, I don't think we stopped going, wow, for hours.
A Space Odyssey, what? What's that? 2000. What's that? What am I supposed to say there? Yeah. Yeah, that's what it says anyway. But is it EMS or EMS?